"Come watch what you lost," said my old love from 20 years ago. The words cut through me like broken glass on a winter morning. I went there, and what I did shocked everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 72 years old. That cold February morning in my tiny Queens apartment, I sat in my faded blue nightgown, staring at the text message that had arrived at 3 in the morning. The coffee in my chipped ceramic mug had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't bring myself to move. The smell of stale cigarettes still clung to the worn curtains I had sewn myself after my husband left, the same curtains that had witnessed 23 years of broken promises and silent tears. Robert's message blinked on my phone screen like a ghost from my past. "Come watch what you lost." Just 7 words that managed to tear open wounds I thought had healed decades ago. My arthritis-stiffened fingers trembled as I read those words over and over, each repetition driving the knife deeper into my chest. I hadn't heard from Robert in 20 years. 20 years since he walked out of my life, leaving nothing but the faint scent of his leather jacket mixed with the vanilla candles I used to light every evening. Back then, in 1983, we were young and foolish and believed that love could conquer everything. He promised he would never leave me. He promised we would grow old together in that little house on Long Island we used to dream about. But promises, I learned, are as fragile as autumn leaves in a New York City storm. The apartment around me felt smaller that morning, suffocating in its silence. My plants drooped by the window, their leaves yellowing despite my daily care. Even they seemed to mirror my own slow decay. The gray February sky pressed against the glass like an unwelcome visitor, swallowing the sounds of the city below until all I could hear was the steady drip of the leaky faucet I couldn't afford to fix. For years, my days had blurred into an endless cycle of routines that nobody noticed or appreciated. I would wake at 5:30, make breakfast that nobody came to eat, water the plants that nobody admired, and sit by the phone waiting for calls that rarely came. The silence had become my constant companion, more familiar than any human voice. But that morning was different. That morning, Robert's message had awakened something in me that I thought had died long ago, a mixture of pain and curiosity that made my heart race like it hadn't in decades. I found myself remembering things I had buried so deep I thought they were gone forever. I remembered the way he used to make me laugh until my sides hurt. I remembered dancing with him in his tiny Brooklyn apartment to old jazz records, his hands warm on my waist, his breath tickling my ear as he whispered how beautiful I was. I remembered believing him. Those memories felt like looking at photographs of strangers now. Was that really me? That young woman with bright eyes and dreams bigger than the city itself? Was that really the same Margaret who now sat alone in an apartment that smelled like loneliness and regret? The phone buzzed again. Another message. "You always wondered what happened to me. Come to Riverside Park at noon, by the old bench where we used to watch the sunset. You'll understand everything." My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Riverside Park. Our place. The bench where he first told me he loved me on a warm September evening in 1982, when the leaves were just beginning to turn and the world felt full of endless possibilities. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Her hair was completely gray now, pulled back in a bun that had lost its shape. Her face was mapped with lines that told stories of disappointment and endurance. Her eyes, once bright with hope, had dimmed to a weary resignation. When had I become this person? When had I stopped being Margaret and become just nobody? The answer came to me in a rush of painful clarity. It had happened gradually, over decades of putting everyone else's needs before my own. It had happened through years of sacrificing my dreams, my health, my happiness for people who took it all for granted. Let me tell you about those years. Let me tell you about the price I paid for love that was never really love at all. My son David was 38 now, married with 2 children of his own. For years, I had been his safety net, his backup plan, his emergency fund. When he wanted to start his restaurant business 15 years ago, I gave him my entire retirement savings, $43,000 that I had scraped together working double shifts as a nurse's aide at Mount Sinai Hospital. "It's just a loan, Mom," he had promised, his eyes bright with entrepreneurial fever. "I'll pay you back with interest once the restaurant takes off." The restaurant never took off. It closed within 2 years, swallowing my money like a hungry beast. David declared bankruptcy, and my $43,000 disappeared into the void of failed dreams and broken promises. When I asked about repayment, he would get defensive, angry even. "You can't put a price on family, Mom. I thought you understood that." But I understood something else. I understood that my love had a price, and I was the only one paying it. My daughter Sarah was even worse. At 35, she had perfected the art of emotional manipulation to a degree that would have impressed con artists. She had a way of making every conversation about her pain, her struggles, her needs. When I tried to share my own problems, she would interrupt with bigger, more dramatic crises that required immediate attention and usually money. "Mom, you don't understand what real stress is," she would say whenever I mentioned my arthritis or my financial worries. "Try raising 3 kids as a single mother while working 2 jobs. Never mind that I had raised 2 children as a single mother while working 3 jobs after her father left. Never mind that I had done it without asking anyone for help, without guilt-tripping my own mother into financing my mistakes. The pattern had been the same for decades. They would call when they needed something: money, babysitting, a place to stay during rough patches. But when I needed them, when I was sick or lonely or afraid, they were always too busy, too stressed, too overwhelmed with their own lives to spare a thought for mine. Last Christmas had been the final straw. I had spent weeks planning a family dinner, cleaning my small apartment until it sparkled, cooking all their favorite dishes despite the pain in my swollen joints. I bought presents I couldn't afford, wrapped them carefully, set the table with my grandmother's china that I never used anymore. They canceled 2 hours before they were supposed to arrive. Something came up, David had texted. No apology, no explanation, just 3 words that dismissed weeks of preparation and a lifetime of putting them first. I sat at that table alone, surrounded by food that would spoil and presents that would remain unopened, and I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, that had been broken so many times I had lost count. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me together for 72 years finally gave way. I started noticing things after that. How phone conversations would suddenly end when I walked into a room. How invitations to family gatherings would come with last-minute changes or cancellations. How my children would discuss their lives, their plans, their futures as if I were already gone. But the real shock came 3 months ago when I was looking through old bills, trying to organize my finances for tax season. Buried among the usual electricity and phone bills, I found something that made my blood run cold: a credit card statement, in my name, for an account I had never opened. My hands trembled as I read through the charges. Expensive restaurants, clothing stores, electronics purchases, thousands of dollars spent over the past 18 months. All on a credit card that someone had opened using my social security number, my date of birth, my personal information. I called the credit card company immediately, my voice barely a whisper as I explained that I hadn't opened this account. The customer service representative was polite but firm. The account had been opened by someone with intimate knowledge of my personal information. Someone who knew my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, the answers to all those security questions that were supposed to protect me. The investigation revealed the truth that I had suspected but hoped wasn't real. The primary cardholder was David. My own son had stolen my identity, run up thousands of dollars in debt, and left me to deal with the consequences. When I confronted him about it, his reaction was everything I had feared and nothing I had prepared for. "You weren't using your credit anyway," he said, as if that justified the theft. "And it's not like you need the money. What are you going to do with it? Buy more plants?" The casualness of his betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow could have. This wasn't a moment of desperation or a single bad decision. This was calculated, premeditated exploitation. This was my own child treating me like a resource to be mined rather than a person to be respected. But even then, even with the evidence right there in black and white, I found myself making excuses for him. Maybe he was desperate. Maybe he didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe if I just talked to him calmly, explained how much this hurt, he would understand and make it right. I was still making excuses for people who had long ago stopped making excuses for themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen nursing a cup of chamomile tea that had gone cold, staring out the window at the city lights that never dimmed. I thought about all the years I had spent bending myself into impossible shapes to fit into other people's lives, all the dreams I had abandoned, all the opportunities I had passed up, all the pieces of myself I had given away until I wasn't sure what was left. I had been a nurse's aide for 35 years, working in hospitals and care facilities, tending to other people's mothers and fathers with the kind of gentle attention I wished someone would show to me. I had saved lives, comforted the dying, held hands with people who had no one else. But when I retired, when my own health began to fail, where were the hands reaching out to hold mine? I had been married for 18 years to a man who left me for his secretary when the children were still young. I had forgiven him his affairs, his drinking, his cruelty, because I believed that love meant accepting everything, no matter how much it hurt. When he walked out, I didn't even ask him to stay. I just watched him pack his bags and drive away, leaving me with two confused children and a mountain of debt he had accumulated in secret. I had spent decades trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect ex-wife, the perfect grandmother. I had swallowed my own needs, buried my own desires, silenced my own voice in service of keeping the peace, maintaining relationships, being the kind of woman who never caused trouble for anyone. And where had it left me? Sitting alone in the apartment that felt more like a prison than a home, wondering if anyone in the world would notice if I simply disappeared. The thought scared me, but not in the way it should have. What scared me was how appealing it sounded. But then Robert's message had arrived, and suddenly I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. What did he want to show me? What had I lost that he thought I needed to see? I knew I had to go. I knew it was probably a mistake, probably another opportunity for disappointment and pain, but I also knew that I couldn't spend the rest of my life sitting in this apartment, waiting for people who would never come, hoping for love that would never arrive. At 11:30 that morning, I put on my best coat, a navy blue wool jacket I had bought for David's wedding 5 years ago, but had worn only twice since. I combed my gray hair and applied a little lipstick, the coral shade I used to wear when I was young and believed in the future. The subway ride to Riverside Park felt like traveling back in time. Every station brought back memories of the woman I used to be, the dreams I used to have, the love I used to believe in. By the time I reached my stop, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Riverside Park in February was not the romantic setting it had been in my memories. The trees were bare, the grass brown and patchy, the benches wet from morning frost. But our bench was still there, overlooking the Hudson River, exactly where it had been 20 years ago. Robert was already waiting. I recognized him immediately, though time had changed us both. He was 74 now, his dark hair completely silver, his face lined with age and experience. But his eyes were the same warm brown I remembered. And when he saw me approaching, he smiled the same smile that had made me believe in fairy tales. "Margaret," he said softly, standing as I approached. "You came. I shouldn't have," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. Despite everything, despite the pain and the years and the betrayal, some part of me was glad to see him. "I know how this must look," he said, gesturing for me to sit beside him on the bench. "Contacting you after all these years. I know you must think I'm crazy, or cruel, or both. I think you're a lot of things," I said carefully. "But I'm here, so I suppose that makes me crazy too." He laughed, a sound that brought back a flood of memories I had spent 20 years trying to forget. We used to laugh together all the time, finding humor in the smallest things, creating our own private world of inside jokes and shared joy. "You want to know what you lost?" he said, his voice growing serious. "Look over there." He pointed toward the playground on the far side of the park, where children were playing despite the cold February air. I squinted, trying to see what he was indicating, and then I saw her. A girl maybe 8 or 9 years old with dark curls and bright eyes, pushing herself high on a swing set. She was laughing, her joy infectious even from a distance. Her face lit up with the kind of pure happiness that only children can achieve. "That's Lucy," Robert said quietly. "My granddaughter. My son Michael's daughter. She looks just like you did when you were young." I stared at the girl, my throat tightening with emotions I couldn't name. She did look like me, or like the old photographs of me as a child that my mother used to keep on the mantelpiece. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. "Because she could have been yours too," he said simply. "If I hadn't been such a coward 20 years ago, if I hadn't left when things got difficult, if I had been brave enough to fight for us instead of running away." The words hung in the air between us like ghosts of all the conversations we should have had decades ago. I felt something crack inside my chest, not breaking but opening, like a door that had been locked for so long I had forgotten it was there. "You left because I wouldn't leave my children," I said, remembering the fight that had ended everything between us. "You wanted me to choose between you and them. I was young and stupid and jealous," he admitted. "I couldn't understand why you wouldn't put us first. I thought love meant being someone's only priority. And now? Now I understand that real love means supporting the people you care about and loving others too. It means being part of something bigger than yourself, not demanding to be the center of everything." I watched Lucy on the swing, her curls flying in the wind, and I felt a pain so deep it took my breath away. Not just for what Robert and I had lost, but for all the love I had been denied by my own family, all the joy I had been excluded from, all the connection I had been starved of for so many years. "I have grandchildren too," I said quietly. 3 of them, but they barely know me. Their parents have made sure of that. Robert turned to look at me, his brown eyes full of concern. "What do you mean?" And suddenly, I found myself telling him everything. About David and the stolen identity, about Sarah and her emotional manipulation, about the canceled Christmas dinner and the years of being taken for granted and used, about the loneliness that had become my constant companion, about the silence that filled my apartment like a living thing. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finished, we sat in silence for several minutes, watching Lucy play while the February wind cut through our coats. "Margaret," he said finally, "you deserve so much better than that." "Do I?" I asked, and I realized I genuinely didn't know the answer. Sometimes I wonder if this is what I get for all the mistakes I made, for not being a good enough mother or wife or person. "No," he said firmly, taking my hand in his. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Nobody deserves to be used and discarded by the people who should love them most." His hand was warm, weathered but gentle, and I realized it had been years since anyone had touched me with kindness. The simple contact made me want to cry. "Why did you really ask me to come here?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, watching Lucy chase another child around the playground. "Because I've spent 20 years regretting the biggest mistake of my life," he said finally. "And because I heard through mutual friends about your divorce, about your struggles, and I wanted you to know that there's still someone in this world who sees your worth." "After 20 years?" "After 20 years," he confirmed. "I never stopped caring about you, Margaret. I never stopped wondering what might have been if I had been brave enough to stay and fight." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in my own mirror for decades. I saw someone who valued me, who respected me, who thought I was worth fighting for. But I also saw the danger in that look, the temptation to fall back into old patterns, to lose myself in someone else's perception of me instead of learning to value myself. "It's too late for us," I said gently. "We're different people now. We've lived different lives." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to run away with me or pretend the last 20 years didn't happen. I'm asking you to remember who you were before the world convinced you that you weren't enough." We talked for another hour, sharing stories about our lives, our children, our disappointments, and small victories. It felt like talking to an old friend, someone who had known me when I still believed in my own dreams. As the afternoon light began to fade, Robert stood to leave. "I want you to have something," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. Inside was a photograph, the two of us at a street fair in Brooklyn, probably taken in 1983. We were both laughing at something off camera, our faces bright with joy and possibility. "I've carried this with me for 20 years, he said. "A reminder of who I used to be when I was with you, someone better than I became after I left." I stared at the photograph, remembering that day. We had eaten cotton candy and ridden the Ferris wheel, and he had won me a stuffed elephant at a ring toss game. For 8 hours, we had been completely happy, completely present with each other, completely alive. "Keep it," I said, trying to hand it back to him. "It's your memory, too." "No," he said, closing my fingers around the small frame. "I want you to have it. I want you to remember that once upon a time, you were someone who laughed like that. Someone who deserved to laugh like that. Someone who still deserves to laugh like that." After he left, I sat alone on the bench for a long time, holding the photograph and watching the last light fade over the Hudson River. The city sounds washed over me, car horns, distant music, the chatter of people walking by. But for the first time in years, the noise didn't feel oppressive. It felt alive. I thought about Lucy on the swing, so full of joy and possibility. I thought about the woman in the photograph, young and happy and unaware of the pain that was coming. And I thought about the woman I was now, 72 years old and tired, but not yet defeated. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called a lawyer. His name was Joseph Martinez, and I found him through the Queens Community Legal Services. He was probably my son's age, with kind eyes and a patient manner, and when I told him about the credit card fraud, he didn't make me feel stupid or naive. "This happens more often than you might think," he said gently. "Adult children taking advantage of elderly parents. It's one of the most common forms of financial abuse." Financial abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had never thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it was. Abuse. "What can we do about it?" I asked. "Well, first we report the fraud to the credit agencies and get your credit frozen so no one can open new accounts in your name. Then we work with the credit card company to dispute the charges. And if you want to press charges against your son, I don't know if I can do that," I said quickly. "He's still my child." Mr. Martinez nodded, understanding. "That's a decision only you can make. But I want you to understand that what he did was a crime, regardless of your relationship to him. And if you don't take action, he'll likely do it again." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the lawyer had said, about the word abuse, about the idea that my own son had committed a crime against me. Part of me wanted to call him, to give him one more chance to make things right, to apologize and promise never to do it again. But a larger part of me was tired. Tired of making excuses, tired of being disappointed, tired of putting everyone else's comfort ahead of my own dignity. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. When David called asking for money to fix his car, I said no. "What do you mean, no?" he asked as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "I mean no, David. I can't lend you money right now. Can't or won't. Both," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I'm dealing with some financial issues of my own right now, partly because someone opened a credit card in my name and ran up thousands of dollars in debt." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom," he said finally, "about that credit card thing, you mean the crime?" I interrupted. "The identity theft? The financial fraud?" Another silence. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice taking on the defensive tone I knew so well. "I was going to pay it back. I hit some rough patches, and I knew you weren't using your credit anyway. It's not like I was trying to hurt you, but you did hurt me, David. You stole my identity, destroyed my credit, and left me to clean up the mess. And now you're calling asking for more money as if nothing happened. You're my mother," he said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Family is supposed to help family." "Yes," I said quietly. "Family is supposed to help family. Where was my family when I needed help? Where were you when I was sick last winter? Where were you when I was sitting alone on Christmas eating the dinner I cooked for people who didn't bother to show up? That's different." "No, David, it's not different. You want me to be your mother when it benefits you, but you don't want to be my son when I need you to be." I hung up the phone before he could respond, and for the first time in years, I felt something like strength flowing through my veins. The phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Sarah. "Mom, David called me. He's really upset. What's going on?" "I told him I couldn't lend him money anymore," I said simply. "But why?" "It's not like you need it for anything important." Those words, "not important," crystallized something for me. In my children's eyes, nothing about my life was important. My needs weren't important. My feelings weren't important. My dignity wasn't important. Only their wants and needs and desires mattered. "Sarah," I said slowly, "what do you think is important in my life?" "I don't understand." "You said I don't need money for anything important. What do you think I should spend my money on? What would qualify as important enough in your opinion?" She was quiet for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the question. "I don't know. I just meant you don't have kids to raise or a mortgage or—" "I have medical expenses," I said. "I have prescription medications that cost more every month. I have a car that needs repairs so I can get to doctor appointments. I have a roof that leaks when it rains and a heating system that barely works. Are those things important enough?" "Well, yes, but nothing, Sarah. My needs are as valid as yours. My life is as valuable as yours, and I'm done pretending otherwise." This time when I hung up, the phone stayed silent. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself, not for groceries or household necessities, but for something I wanted. I bought a new sweater, soft blue cashmere that felt like clouds against my skin. I bought a book I had wanted to read, a best-selling novel about a woman who leaves her old life behind and starts over in a new city. And I bought a small potted orchid, pale pink with delicate petals, to replace one of the dying plants on my windowsill. When I got home, I arranged the orchid on the small table by the window, where it would catch the morning sun. Its beauty seemed to transform the entire corner of the room, bringing life and color to a space that had felt gray for so long. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Over the following weeks, a strange thing happened. As I began to say no to my children's demands, as I began to prioritize my own needs and wants, I started to remember who I was before I became everyone else's solution to their problems. I remembered that I had once loved to paint watercolors, spending hours capturing the changing light in Prospect Park. I signed up for an art class at the Queen's Library, and my first hesitant brush strokes felt like coming home to myself. I remembered that I had once had friends, women who laughed with me and shared their hopes and fears. I called my old friend Rosa, a nurse I had worked with years ago, and we met for coffee. She told me she had been wanting to reconnect for years, but didn't know if I'd want to hear from her. "I always felt like your family kept you so busy," she said gently. "Like there wasn't room for friendships in your life." She was right. I had allowed my children to consume every spare moment, every extra dollar, every bit of emotional energy I had. I had made them the center of my universe and then wondered why I felt so empty when they ignored me. But the hardest part was yet to come. 3 weeks after my conversation with Mr. Martinez, David showed up at my apartment. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, desperate. For a moment, my maternal instincts kicked in, and I wanted to invite him in, make him something to eat, ask what was wrong. Instead, I stayed in the doorway. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About this crazy lawyer thing. About you freezing your credit and making a big deal out of nothing. You're embarrassing me, and you're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself?" "People are talking, Mom. They're saying you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're being vindictive and cruel to your own family over a simple misunderstanding." I stared at him, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. When had he become someone who could steal from me and then make me feel guilty for reporting it? When had he become someone who cared more about what people thought than about the pain he had caused? "David," I said quietly, "what you did wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. You stole my identity, used my social security number, ran up thousands of dollars in debt, and left me to deal with the consequences. That's not a family disagreement. That's a crime. I'm your son," he said, as if that should matter more than the law, more than right and wrong, more than simple human decency. "Yes, you are. And I love you because you're my son, but I don't have to let you destroy my life because you're my son." His face hardened. "If you don't drop this ridiculous legal action, you'll never see me or your grandchildren again." The threat hung in the air between us like a blade. For a moment, I felt the familiar panic, the desperate need to give in, to apologize, to do whatever it took to keep the peace and maintain the relationship. But then I thought about Lucy on the swing, laughing with pure joy. I thought about the woman in the photograph Robert had given me, young and happy and full of possibilities. And I thought about the orchid on my windowsill, blooming despite being planted in new soil. "David," I said, and my voice was steady as a rock, "I haven't seen you or your children in months. You only call when you need money. You've already removed me from your life in every way that matters. The only difference now is that you can't use me anymore." His face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, hurt, and finally a cold fury that chilled me. "Fine," he said. "Have it your way. But don't come crying to me when you're sitting alone in some nursing home with no family to visit you." After he left, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not for the relationship I was losing, but for the relationship I had never really had. I had spent 38 years loving a fantasy, trying to earn affection from someone who saw me as a resource rather than a person. But my tears weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of relief. For the first time in decades, I was free from the exhausting work of trying to buy love from people who had no love to sell. Sarah's reaction was different, but equally revealing. She came by 2 days later with her youngest daughter, Emma, who was 6 years old and had always been my favorite grandchild. "Hi, Grandma," Emma called out, running to hug me. Her small arms around my waist felt like pure love, uncomplicated and genuine. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of her curly head. "I missed you. I missed you too. Mommy says you're mad at everyone." I looked at Sarah over Emma's head. "I'm not mad, honey. Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions to take care of themselves." "Mom," Sarah said quietly, "can we talk privately?" I settled Emma in front of the television with a coloring book and some crayons, then joined Sarah in the kitchen. "David told me what happened," she said without preamble. "About the lawyer and the credit card thing and everything. And I think you're making a huge mistake. Yes, what David did was wrong, but he's family. We protect family, even when they mess up. Sarah, he didn't mess up. He committed fraud. He stole thousands of dollars from me and would have let me deal with the consequences while he walked away. But did you give him a chance to make it right? Did you try talking to him before you went to a lawyer?" I stared at my daughter, this woman I had raised to be strong and independent, and I realized that somewhere along the way, she had learned to enable bad behavior instead of demanding better. "How exactly would he make it right?" I asked. "The debt is already on my credit report. The damage is already done. And more importantly, how can I trust someone who would do this in the first place?" "He's your son," she said, echoing David's words. "And you're my daughter," I replied. "But I don't see you offering to pay off the debt he racked up in my name. I don't see you offering to help with my medical bills or my rent or any of the things I actually need help with. The only time any of you contact me is when you need something from me." Sarah's face flushed. "That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner or asked about my life, or showed any interest in me as a person rather than as a source of free babysitting and emergency funds?" She was quiet for several minutes, and I could see her struggling with concepts she had never had to examine before. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally. "I don't know how to be your daughter without needing things from you. That's how it's always been." Her honesty caught me off guard. For a moment, I saw not the manipulative adult who had learned to use guilt as a weapon, but the little girl who had needed me to make everything better, to solve every problem, to be the strong one who never needed anything in return. Maybe that's the problem, I said gently. Maybe I taught you to see me as a solution to your problems instead of a person with problems of her own. So what happens now? She asked. Do you just cut us all off? Do you decide you don't want to be our mother anymore? I'll always be your mother, I said. But I won't be your bank account anymore. I won't be your emergency fund or your backup plan or your scapegoat when things go wrong. I'm going to be your mother, which means I'm going to love you enough to stop enabling you to treat me badly. From the living room came Emma's voice. Grandma, look what I drew. I went to see her picture, a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. That's us, she explained proudly. That's me and you. Looking at that simple, loving drawing, I made a decision that surprised even me. Emma, I said, kneeling down to her level, would you like to come stay with Grandma this weekend? Just you and me. We could go to the museum and maybe paint some pictures together. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Just us? Just us, I confirmed, and I saw something shift in Sarah's expression. Mom, I don't think that's a good idea given everything that's happening. Why? I asked, standing up to face her. Because I might tell Emma the truth about how adults should treat each other? Because I might show her what it looks like to value yourself and expect basic respect from the people who claim to love you? Because you're trying to turn my daughter against me. No, Sarah. I'm trying to show my granddaughter that she deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, and that she should never accept less than that from anyone, including family. If you think that would turn her against you, maybe you should examine what that says about how you treat people. The visit ended awkwardly, but Emma's excited goodbye hug sustained me through the uncomfortable silence that followed Sarah's departure. That weekend with Emma was a revelation. Without the pressure of managing everyone else's drama, without the constant demands for money and favors and emotional labor, I was free to simply be a grandmother. We went to the Museum of Natural History and spent hours looking at dinosaur bones and meteorites. We painted watercolors in my kitchen, and Emma's uninhibited joy reminded me why I had loved art in the first place. Most importantly, Emma talked to me like I was a real person, not just a source of treats and special privileges. She told me about school, about her friends, about a book she was reading. She asked me about my life, about what it was like when I was little, about my favorite colors and foods and memories. Grandma, she said on Sunday afternoon as we were cleaning up our art supplies, why don't you come to our house anymore? The question caught me off guard. In my children's version of events, I was the one who was being difficult, the one who was pulling away from the family. But Emma's innocent observation revealed a different truth. What do you mean, sweetheart? You used to come for dinner sometimes and for my birthday parties and stuff, but you don't anymore. Mommy says you're too busy, but you don't seem too busy to me. I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, and it makes it hard for them to spend time together. But that doesn't mean I don't love you and want to see you. Are you and Mommy having a disagreement? Yes, we are. About what? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother has learned to see her grandmother as a resource rather than a person? How do you explain decades of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation without damaging a child's relationship with her parent? We're disagreeing about how people should treat each other, I said finally. I think everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, even grandmas. Your mommy thinks that some people should always give and other people should always take. Emma considered this seriously. I think you're right, she said. Everyone should be kind. Yes, they should. Can I still come visit you even if you and Mommy are having a disagreement? I hope so, sweetheart. I would love that very much. When Sarah came to pick up Emma, the tension was palpable. But something had changed in my daughter's demeanor. She was quieter, more thoughtful, and when Emma chattered excitedly about our weekend together, Sarah listened with what looked like genuine interest. She really had a good time, Sarah said as Emma gathered her things. So did I replied. She's a wonderful little girl. You should be proud. I am. Sarah hesitated at the door. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about how we treat you, and I think maybe you have a point. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And for the first time in years, I felt like Sarah might actually be seeing me as a person rather than just a mother. I'd like to try to do better, she continued. I don't know how exactly, but I'd like to try. I'd like that too, I said. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Not hope that my children would suddenly become the people I had always wanted them to be, but hope that I could continue to become the person I was meant to be. The legal proceedings with David's credit card fraud moved slowly but steadily. Mr. Martinez was patient and thorough, walking me through each step, explaining my rights, helping me understand that protecting myself wasn't selfish or vindictive. It was necessary. "Your son has contacted our office several times," he told me during one of our meetings. "He's asking if you'd be willing to settle this privately, without pressing charges." What does that mean? It means he pays back the money he stole, probably in installments, and you agree not to pursue criminal charges. The debt would still be removed from your credit report, but he wouldn't face jail time or have a criminal record. I thought about it for several days. Part of me wanted to accept the settlement, to avoid the trauma of a public legal battle, to maintain some possibility of reconciliation with my son, but another part of me knew that letting him off easy would just reinforce the lesson that actions don't have consequences, that family loyalty meant accepting abuse. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Mr. Martinez. "I think you should do whatever you need to do to feel safe and respected," he said. "But I will tell you this. In my experience, people who steal from family members don't usually stop after the first time. They escalate." His words echoed something Robert had said during one of our phone calls. We had been talking regularly since our meeting in the park, not as former lovers trying to recapture the past, but as old friends offering each other support and understanding. "You taught your children that your boundaries aren't real," he had said gently. "Every time you gave in when you should have said no, every time you accepted disrespect to keep the peace, you taught them that they could treat you however they wanted without consequences." I was trying to love them, I had protested. "I know. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. And enabling isn't good for anyone. Not for you, and not for them." His insight helped me make my decision. I told Mr. Martinez to proceed with the criminal charges. David's reaction was swift and brutal. He called me screaming, accusing me of destroying his life, of being a vindictive old woman who cared more about money than family. He threatened to make sure I never saw my grandchildren again, to tell everyone what a horrible mother I had been, to turn the entire family against me. But his threats felt hollow now. I had already lost most of my family relationships. They had been built on such shaky foundations that they couldn't survive me developing self-respect. And his accusations of being a horrible mother no longer had the power to devastate me, because I was beginning to understand that being a good mother didn't mean accepting abuse from your children. The trial, when it finally came, was brief and straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming. Credit card statements, forged applications, testimony from bank officials. David's lawyer tried to paint him as a desperate man who had made a mistake, but the prosecutor countered with evidence showing this wasn't his first time using someone else's credit information. He was sentenced to 2 years probation and full restitution. More importantly for me, the charges were removed from my credit report, and I was free from the financial burden he had placed on me. But the real transformation happened not in the courthouse, but in the months leading up to it. As word spread about the legal proceedings, David made sure everyone knew about my betrayal. I discovered who my real friends were. Most of my acquaintances took David's side, clucking their tongues about how sad it was when families fell apart, how important it was to forgive and forget. But a few people surprised me. Rosa, my old colleague, not only supported my decision, but shared her own story about financial abuse from her brother. Mrs. Chen from the apartment downstairs, who I had barely spoken to in 5 years, knocked on my door one evening with a pot of soup and a quiet declaration that she thought I was brave. And Robert, who listened without judgment as I worked through my anger and guilt and fear, who reminded me over and over that I deserved better, that it wasn't too late to start over. "You know," he said during one of our walks through Prospect Park, "I used to think I ruined my life when I left you. I spent 20 years convinced that I had thrown away my chance at happiness." "Didn't you?" I asked. "No," he said, stopping to watch a group of children feeding ducks in the pond. "I think we both needed to live the lives we lived to become the people we are now. You needed to learn that you can't love someone into respecting you. I needed to learn that running away from difficult situations doesn't solve them. And now? Now I think we're both old enough and wise enough to build something real." I looked at him, this man who had known me when I still believed in fairy tales, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the possibility of being loved for who I was rather than what I could provide. But I also felt caution. I had spent so many years defining myself through other people's needs that I wasn't sure I knew who I was when I wasn't taking care of someone else. "I need time," I told him. "I need to figure out who I am when I'm not being someone's mother or someone's solution or someone's bank account. Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The watercolor classes became a sanctuary for me. There's something meditative about mixing colors, about watching paint bloom across wet paper, about creating something beautiful from nothing but pigment and water. My instructor, a woman named Janet, who was about my age, encouraged us to paint our emotions rather than trying to create realistic representations. My first paintings were dark, full of grays and muddy browns, representing the years of feeling invisible and unappreciated. But as the weeks went by, colors began to emerge. Blues for the peace I was finding in solitude, yellows for the joy of discovering my own interests, greens for the growth I felt happening inside me. Other students in the class began to seek out my company. We would go for coffee after class, talking about art and life and the challenges of starting over later in life. For the first time in years, I had friendships based on mutual interest and affection rather than obligation or need. One afternoon, as I was painting a sunset over the Hudson River, a scene that reminded me of that bench where Robert and I had reconnected, Janet paused behind my easel. "You've really found your voice," she said. "These recent paintings have so much life in them." "I feel like I'm just learning who I am," I admitted. "That's the most exciting kind of learning there is," she replied. "Most people stop growing when they're young. They think they know who they are and they stop exploring, stop questioning, stop changing. But look at you. At 72, you're becoming someone new." Her words stayed with me as I walked home through the busy Queens streets. I was becoming someone new, someone who said no when people tried to take advantage of me, someone who pursued her own interests and pleasures, someone who expected to be treated with respect and kindness, someone worth knowing. That evening, Emma called me. Sarah had given her my phone number and permission to call whenever she wanted, a small but significant gesture that suggested my daughter was trying to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. "Grandma, guess what?" Emma said, her excitement bubbling through the phone. "What, sweetheart?" "I painted a picture of you. It's you painting a picture, and there are rainbows everywhere because you told me you like to paint rainbows." I hadn't told her that, but it was true. In recent weeks, I had been painting a lot of rainbows, drawn to their symbolism of hope after storms. "I would love to see it," I said. "Mommy says I can give it to you next weekend when I come visit." "I can come visit again, right?" "Of course you can. As often as your mommy says it's okay. She says it's always okay now. She says she likes that you and me are friends." After I hung up, I sat in my living room looking at my latest painting, still drying on the easel I had set up by the window. It was a self-portrait, something that would have been impossible for me to attempt even 6 months ago. How can you paint yourself when you don't know who you are? But the woman in the painting was someone I recognized now. She had gray hair and lined skin and tired eyes, but there was something else in her face. A quiet strength, a sense of self-possession, a spark of life that had been missing for too long. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Robert. "Thinking about you tonight. Hope you're well." I smiled and typed back, "I am well. Better than I've been in years. I'm glad to hear it. Would you like to have dinner this weekend? There's a little Italian place in Brooklyn I've been wanting to try." I stared at the message for several minutes. 6 months ago, the invitation would have terrified me. I would have worried about what it meant, where it was leading, whether I was ready for complications in my newly simplified life. But now I felt only anticipation. Dinner with an old friend who had become a new friend. Good food and conversation, and the rare pleasure of being seen and valued by someone who asked nothing from me but my company. "I'd love to," I typed back, looking forward to it. As spring turned into summer, my life began to take on a rhythm I had never experienced before. Not the frantic pace of crisis management and constant giving that had defined my earlier years, but a gentler cadence of chosen activities and genuine relationships. I painted 3 mornings a week and volunteered at the community center 2 afternoons, helping other seniors navigate the social services system. It felt good to use my hard-won knowledge to help people who were facing some of the same challenges I had overcome. Sarah visited regularly, sometimes bringing Emma, sometimes coming alone. We were learning to have conversations that weren't centered around her problems or my solutions. She told me about her job, her hopes for the future, her struggles with single parenthood. I shared stories about my art classes, my growing friendship with Robert, my volunteer work. "You seem different," she said one hot July afternoon as we sat in my air-conditioned living room, watching Emma color at the coffee table. "How so?" "Happier, more, I don't know, more like yourself, I guess." "I'm learning to be myself," I said. For years, I was everyone else's mother, everyone else's solution. I forgot I was also just Margaret. "I never thought about that," Sarah said quietly. "I never thought about who you were outside of being our mother." "Most children don't," I said without judgment. "It's natural, but most mothers don't lose themselves as completely as I did." "I'm sorry about that," she said, and I could hear genuine regret in her voice. "I'm sorry we made you feel like you didn't matter except for what you could give us." It was the apology I had been waiting decades to hear. And when it finally came, I discovered it mattered less than I had expected. The healing had already begun, with or without her acknowledgement, but it was still nice to receive. David and I had no contact during this period. Through Sarah, I learned that he was struggling financially and emotionally following his conviction, that his wife was considering leaving him, that he blamed me for all of his problems. Part of me felt guilty about his suffering, but a larger part of me recognized that his troubles were the natural consequences of his own choices, not the result of my refusal to enable him. "Do you miss him?" Robert asked one evening as we walked along the boardwalk at Coney Island, eating ice cream like teenagers despite being in our 70s. "I miss who I thought he was," I said. "I miss the relationship I imagined we had, but the real David, the one who stole from me and threatened me and tried to make me feel guilty for protecting myself, no, I don't miss him. That must be painful." It is, but it's also liberating. I spent so many years trying to love him into being someone he wasn't. Now I can focus my energy on people who actually exist, like Emma and Sarah and you. He smiled and took my hand as we walked. His fingers were warm and familiar, and I realized that what I felt for him now was different from what I had felt 20 years ago. It was deeper, more grounded in reality rather than fantasy, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than desperate need. "Margaret," he said as we found a bench overlooking the ocean, "I have something I want to ask you." My heart skipped a beat, but not with fear, with anticipation. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about selling my apartment and getting a place with a little more space. Maybe even a small house with a garden where we could both paint outdoors when the weather's nice." I looked at him, this man who had walked back into my life at exactly the moment when I was ready to receive him, and I felt a surge of joy so pure it took my breath away. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" I asked. "I'm asking if you'd like to build a life with me. Not the fairy tale we imagined when we were young, but something real and sustainable and beautiful." I thought about my small apartment, the place where I had learned to value myself, where I had discovered who I was when I wasn't taking care of everyone else. It had been my cocoon, the safe space where I had transformed from a doormat into a woman who knew her own worth. But I was ready to leave the cocoon now, ready to spread wings I hadn't known I possessed. "Yes," I said simply. "I'd like that very much." He leaned over and kissed me, gentle and sweet, and I tasted possibility on his lips. That night, I called Emma to tell her the news. "Does this mean Robert is going to be my step-grandfather?" she asked with the practical curiosity of a child. "I don't know what it means yet," I said honestly, "but it means I'm going to be happy, and that's good for everyone who loves me. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you know." The house Robert and I found was a small Victorian in Astoria, with a front porch and a backyard big enough for a garden. It needed work, but we didn't mind. We had time now and energy we had never had when we were younger and pulled in so many directions. We spent the fall painting walls and planting bulbs and learning to live together as the people we had become, rather than the people we used to be. It wasn't always easy. We were both set in our ways, both protective of routines we had developed during our years of solitude. But we approached each challenge with patience and humor, and the wisdom that comes from knowing that love is a choice you make every day, not a feeling that happens to you. Sarah and Emma visited often, and gradually other friends began joining us for dinners and holiday celebrations. The house filled with laughter and conversation and the kind of warmth that comes from genuine connection rather than obligation. One evening in November, as I was preparing dinner and Robert was reading in his chair by the window, Emma called with news. "Grandma, Daddy called Mommy today," she said, using the name she had always used for David. My heart clenched. "Oh? What did he want?" "He wants to see you. He says he's sorry and he wants to make things right." I sat down heavily in the kitchen chair, feeling the weight of all the complicated emotions that David's name still evoked. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Emma, genuinely curious about her perspective. "I think you should do whatever makes you feel safe," she said, and I realized I had been teaching her well about boundaries and self-respect. But I also think maybe people can change if they really want to. That night, Robert and I talked until almost midnight about forgiveness, about second chances, about the difference between being open to change and being naive about people's capacity for it. "What does your gut tell you?" he asked. "That I'm not the same person who would have dropped everything to fix his problems," I said. "And maybe that's what he needs to understand." I called David the next day. "Mom?" His voice was tentative, uncertain in a way I had never heard before. "Hello, David. Thank you for calling me back. I wasn't sure you would. I'm calling because Emma asked me to. She thinks you've changed." I have changed. I mean, I'm trying to change. The conviction, the probation, almost losing my marriage. It made me look at myself in ways I never had before. "What did you see?" He was quiet for a long time. I saw someone who took advantage of the people who loved him most. Someone who justified stealing from his own mother because it was easier than dealing with his problems like a grown man. His words sounded genuine, but I had been fooled by words before. David, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not someone who will enable bad behavior or accept disrespect in the name of family loyalty. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built on mutual respect and honesty. I understand. I know I have a lot to make up for. You have everything to make up for, I said bluntly. And even then, I can't promise things will go back to the way they were. Too much has happened. I know, I miss my mom. I miss having you in my life. The pain in his voice was real, and despite everything, it touched the part of me that would always be his mother. Would you like to meet for coffee? I asked. Somewhere public? Somewhere neutral? We can talk and see if there's a foundation to build on. Yes, I'd like that very much. We met a week later at a cafe in Manhattan, neutral territory where neither of us had memories or expectations. David looked older than his 38 years, worn down by consequences, and maybe by the work of examining his own behavior. You look good, Mom, he said as we sat down with our coffee. Happy. I am happy, I said. For the first time in years, I'm happy. I heard about Robert. Sarah told me you're living together now. Yes. Are you going to marry him? I don't know. We're taking things one day at a time, building something real instead of rushing towards some predetermined idea of what our relationship should be. He nodded, and I could see him processing the idea that I had a life independent of my role as his mother. Mom, I need to tell you some things. About the credit cards, about the money, about all of it. For the next hour, he told me things I hadn't known, things that made his betrayal even worse than I had realized. He had been forging my signature for years, not just on the credit card I had discovered. He had written checks from my account, used my information to get loans, created an entire shadow financial life in my name. By the time he finished, I felt sick. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I'm in therapy, and my therapist says I can't build real relationships on a foundation of lies. And because you deserve to know the truth about what I did to you. I sat with the information, feeling the full weight of his betrayal settling over me like a heavy blanket. David, what you've just told me, it's worse than I thought. It's not just a few bad decisions made in desperation. It's a pattern of systematic financial abuse that went on for years. I know. I don't know if I can forgive that. I understand if you can't. We sat in silence for several minutes, the cafe bustling around us while we dealt with the ruins of our relationship. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Nothing, he said. And for the first time in our entire conversation, he looked directly at me. I don't want anything from you anymore, Mom. I want to give you something. What? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. It was made out to me for $43,000. The exact amount of my retirement savings that had disappeared into his failed restaurant. I can't give you back the years I stole from you, he said. I can't undo the damage I did to your credit or your peace of mind, but I can give you back the money that was rightfully yours. I stared at the check, hardly believing what I was seeing. Where did this come from? I sold my car, cashed out what was left of my 401k, borrowed against my life insurance. It took months to put together, but it's all there. Every penny I took from you, plus interest. David, I know it doesn't fix everything. I know money can't repair the trust I broke or undo the pain I caused, but it's a start. It's me taking responsibility for what I did instead of making excuses or expecting you to just get over it. I looked at this man, my son, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse instead of manipulation, real accountability instead of self-pity. This is a lot of money, I said. Money you probably need for your own family. My family will be fine. We're learning to live within our means, to solve our problems without using other people. It's been hard, but it's been good for us. I folded the check and put it in my purse. Thank you. Does this mean you can forgive me? I considered his question carefully. I think forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I can see that you're trying to change, and I respect that. But trust is something that has to be rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions over time. I understand. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be different from what it was before. I won't be your emergency fund or your problem solver. I won't enable bad decisions or accept disrespect. Can you live with that? I want to try. Then we'll try. Slowly, carefully, with boundaries in place to protect both of us. That meeting was the beginning of a very different relationship between David and me. He wasn't magically transformed overnight. Change is slower and more complicated than that. But over the following months, He proved through consistent actions that he was serious about making amends. He paid for family therapy sessions for all of us. He called regularly just to check on me without asking for anything in return. He brought his children to visit and stayed to have real conversations instead of dropping them off like packages. Most importantly, he never again asked me for money, solutions, or excuses for his behavior. The check he had given me sat on my dresser for several weeks while I decided what to do with it. $43,000 was more money than I had seen in one place since I originally gave it to him years before. Robert suggested I use some of it to travel. "You've spent your whole life taking care of other people," he said. "When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I realized I couldn't remember. I used part of the money to fund college accounts for Emma and her siblings, not as gifts to my children, but as investments in my grandchildren's futures. I used another portion to renovate the house Robert and I shared, turning the sunroom into an art studio where we both could paint. But I saved the largest portion for something I had dreamed about for decades, but never thought I could afford. "I want to take an art class in Italy," I told Robert one evening as we were making dinner together. "A painting workshop in Tuscany. Something I've wanted to do since I was young but never had the time or money for." His face lit up. "That sounds wonderful. When do we leave?" "We? You don't think I'd let you have an adventure like that without me, do you?" The trip to Italy was everything I had dreamed it would be and more. We spent 2 weeks painting landscapes in the Tuscan countryside, eating amazing food, exploring medieval villages, and falling in love all over again, not just with each other, but with life itself, with the world and all its beauty. On our last evening, as we sat on the terrace of our small hotel watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and rose, Robert took my hand. "Margaret, there's something I want to ask you." I looked at him, this man who had given me a second chance at love, at life, at becoming who I was meant to be. "I know we said we didn't need to get married, that we were too old for conventional gestures," he continued, "but I want to make a promise to you in front of the people who matter to us. I want to promise to love you and respect you and build a life with you for whatever time we have left." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small emerald. "Will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the golden light spreading across the Italian countryside, and I felt a joy so complete it seemed to fill every cell of my body. "Yes," I said, laughing through tears I didn't realize were falling. "Yes, I'll marry you." We were married 3 months later in the garden behind our house in Astoria, surrounded by a small group of people who truly cared about us. Emma was my maid of honor, wearing a dress she had chosen herself and a smile that lit up the entire backyard. Sarah cried during the ceremony, tears of joy for my happiness. David was there too, standing quietly in the back, and afterward he hugged me with genuine warmth. "I'm happy for you, Mom," he said. "You deserve this." Robert's children flew in from California, and I was touched by how warmly they welcomed me into their family. His daughter Maria pulled me aside during the reception. "Thank you for making my father happy again," she said. "After our mother died, I thought he'd never. Thank you for accepting me," I replied. "I never expected to have a second chance at this." "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "The trick is being brave enough to take it." As I write this, it's been 2 years since that text message from Robert changed my life. 2 years since I began the journey from invisible doormat to valued human being. It hasn't been easy. Transformation never is. There have been setbacks and difficult moments, times when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But I've learned to recognize my own worth, to set boundaries that protect my peace, to choose relationships that add to my life rather than drain it. I've learned that saying no to the wrong things creates space to say yes to the right things. My relationship with my children continues to evolve. Sarah and I have built something genuine and mutually respectful. Emma visits often and has begun painting with me, showing a natural talent that fills me with pride. David and I have a cordial relationship built on respect rather than need. And while we may never be close the way we once were, we found a way to coexist that doesn't require me to sacrifice my dignity. Robert and I have been married for 18 months now, and every day I wake up grateful for this unexpected chapter in my life. We paint together in the mornings, tend our garden in the afternoons, and spend our evenings reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. It's not the passionate romance of our youth, but it's something deeper and more sustaining. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection. Sometimes I think about the woman I was 3 years ago, sitting alone in that dreary apartment, accepting scraps of attention from people who saw her as a resource rather than a person. I feel compassion for her, but I don't miss being her. She taught me resilience and endurance, qualities I've needed for this transformation, but she also taught me what I don't want to accept anymore. The most important thing I've learned is that it's never too late to start over. At 74, I'm living the most authentic, joyful life I've ever had. I'm married to someone who sees and values me. I have friendships based on mutual affection. I pursue my art because it brings me joy, not because it serves someone else's needs. I give my time and energy to causes I care about, not because I feel guilty or obligated, but because I choose to. Last week, I got another unexpected message. This one was from a woman named Linda, someone I had worked with years ago at the hospital. She had heard through mutual friends about my transformation. Apparently, my story of standing up to financial abuse and rebuilding my life had spread through the community of retired healthcare workers. I don't know if you remember me, her message read, but I'm in a situation similar to what you went through. My daughter has been taking money from my accounts, and my son treats me like an unpaid babysitter. I feel trapped and worthless, but I heard about what you did, about how you found the courage to change things. Could we maybe talk sometime? I could use some advice from someone who's been there. I stared at her message for a long time, remembering the isolation and despair I had felt during my darkest moments. Remembering how alone I had believed I was, how convinced I was that no one would understand or care about my situation. I called her immediately. Linda? This is Margaret Morrison. I got your message. Margaret, thank you so much for calling. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Of course I remember you, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this. What you're going through, what you're feeling, I understand it completely. We talked for 2 hours that first time, and I could hear her relief at finally having someone who understood, someone who didn't judge her for feeling trapped by people who were supposed to love her. How did you find the courage to change things? She asked. I realized that staying in a bad situation wasn't protecting anyone, I said. It was just teaching people that they could treat me badly without consequences. When I started respecting myself, some people rose to meet that respect, and others showed me who they really were. Both pieces of information were valuable. Since then, Linda and I have talked regularly. She's begun setting boundaries with her children, protecting her finances, and reclaiming her own life. It's slow work, but she's making progress. Her situation has reminded me that my story isn't unique. There are thousands of older adults, particularly women, who find themselves trapped in relationships where they give everything and receive little in return. People who have been taught that love means accepting any treatment, no matter how damaging. But there's hope for all of us. It's never too late to learn to value yourself. It's never too late to demand respect from the people in your life. It's never too late to discover who you are when you're not busy being what everyone else needs you to be. If any part of my story sounds familiar to you, if you see yourself in the woman I used to be, I want you to know that change is possible. It won't be easy, and you may lose relationships that you thought were precious. But you'll gain something far more valuable: yourself. You'll discover that your needs matter, that your dreams are valid, that your peace of mind is worth protecting. You'll learn the difference between love and enabling, between kindness and being a doormat, between family loyalty and accepting abuse. And if you're very lucky, like I was, you might discover that when you stop accepting scraps, you create space for people who want to offer you a feast. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like mine? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, valued only for what you could provide rather than who you are? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is share our experiences with people who understand. And if my journey has touched you in any way, if it's given you hope or courage or simply the knowledge that you're not alone, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me reach other people who might need to hear that it's never too late to start valuing yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me not as someone's mother or someone's solution, but as Margaret, a woman who learned to love herself enough to demand love in return. Remember, you are worthy of respect, kindness, and genuine love. Don't settle for less than you deserve, no matter who is offering it or what they claim it represents. Your life, your peace, your happiness, these things matter. You matter. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give the people you love is showing them what it looks like to treat yourself with dignity. You might be surprised by how many of them rise to meet that example.